This is the Roundtable, a talk show brought to you by the Glastonbury Goddess Conference. In this circle, the priestesses of the ceremonial circle, the weavers of our annual gathering, talk about pivotal topics about our community, spirituality, and goddess. Join us this year for the 29th Glastonbury Goddess Conference, a joyful gathering of goddess-loving people, a 6 days in-person event in Glastonbury, Avalon, running from Tuesday 30th July to Sunday 4th August 2024, with the fringe events starting from Sunday 28th July. This year the theme is the Goddess of Healing. It's our maiden year, the first year of a new 5-year cycle. International presenters, transformative workshops and experiences, deep ceremonies on the sacred land of Avalon, community, art, fun, and love for Goddess. Let your healing journey begin this year. Join us for the Glastonbury Goddess Conference, Goddess of Healing. There are so many options to participate: full conference tickets, weekend tickets, day tickets. Find what suits you best and get your ticket now at goddessconference.com. Beloved Goddess community, welcome to this 10th episode of the Roundtable. It's such a pleasure to be back once again with a wonderful panel today. I'm really happy to introduce Caroline Stevens.
Hi.
Marion Brigantia.
Oh.
And 𝗂𝗓𝗔𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗡 finally joining us for this live happening.
Hi.
So today's theme is a very hot topic for the international goddess community and for the pagan community as well. It's witch please. So this very funny way of saying brings us to three main questions we're gonna try to tackle today. The first one is, are we truly reclaiming a word that was used against bigotry scapegoats of old, or did we just fall collectively under the charm of the esoteric mystique? The second one is, can we be honest in what brings us to the more witchy and esoteric terms and practices of our spiritualities? And the third one is, can we see through it and be real with our tastes and perceptions? This is all based on a general literature about witches that sometimes it's based on these brave and generous women and men who helped villages and populations, wise women, people who knew the usage of herbs and medicaments and used them to help people, and then were persecuted, they were ostracized, and they were burned at the stake by the Inquisition. And sometimes, we fall under the spell of, different stories that depict these powerful women behaving like Sex and the City characters, meeting in the woods and celebrating mischievous shoppings in medieval times, which is, it's of course, it's a lore and a mythology we can all maybe find solace and fun within, but in a certain way, it is important to know where the allure comes from for all of us in the word witch, and why do we claim we are ourselves witches, and where historically that terms come from, and so that the revolution of reclaiming the word witch and as a meaning and a sense for all of us in a way. So this is a very open debate today to see how each of us experience the word witch, if we do identify or not in the word witch, and where are our historic, affiliations to that word, and if there are any, or what does the word witch mean for each one of us? So starting with this topic today is 𝗂𝗓𝗔𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗡.
Thank you, Andrea. So before I share my research and opinion on this, I just want to really honor everyone who does refer to themselves as a witch, because this is such an individual thing. That is my black cat meowing, who's wanting to be involved in this conversation. So I spent many years researching the witch burnings, specifically the Roman Inquisition, for my historical witch burnings novel, The Serpent's Tail. And within my book, there is a scene where the evil patriarchal bishop challenges the wise woman priestess of the village. And he accuses her of being a witch. And she actually says, I am no witch, I am priestess. And within my novel of Sophia. And this was very important in my research because the word witch, or in Italian strega, was a very pejorative term that was used by the Roman Inquisition. And that was why I had my wise woman character reclaim the term priestess rather than the pejorative and derogatory term witch, which was used to ultimately torture and kill them. And that really came across very strongly in all my research. And then the other thing that I really wanted to mention, because I never see this mentioned in relation to the witch burnings, but it was another thing that was very evident in my research, is that many of the women who were burned as witches were not wise women or healers or midwives. They were wealthy widows who owned huge estates. And the reason why the church charged them as being witches and burned them was to seize their property and lands. It was the patriarchal acquisition of wealth. So this is something that I never see talked about. And I think that's really important because it's a bit of a romanticized notion that every woman who was burned as a witch was a wise woman healer. That's not actually historical truth. And that might be quite triggering for people to hear that, but it is a really interesting debate. Yeah,
that's very interesting because I think I didn't hear that about, I didn't know about the rich widows, but I know from historical facts that the witches were also just people that were inconvenient in a village. You know, somebody who they just want to get rid of, and it became like almost like an excuse to get rid of anybody who was not fitting in. So that's another side that I've heard or read. I read it somewhere or heard it on documentary or something. That so it's an interesting, and if you look at things of Joan of Arc, for instance. You know, she was actually a Christian. She got Christian messages, and so it still was not accepted by the church. So I think it's very much like somebody who wasn't very convenient or didn't fit in or was too challenging for the church. I think they used it a lot as a power tool to get rid of people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And one of the most shocking things I read was that the word faggot comes from the fact that they used the bodies of homosexuals as the firewood. So again, that was another way in which they were using this concept of the witch burnings to, just as you say, Marion, try and eradicate certain individuals or groups of individuals that didn't resonate with their ideologies.
Shocking, isn't it?
Well, that is also very, very, but that really traces a line where I heard about what Annabelle is mentioning here. So it's like the great redistribution of, in a way that it was used as witchcraft was used as an instrument in a way to redistribute or appropriate resources, so lands and maybe territories that were passed on to widows who were very rich and very wealthy, but also they owned lands so that could be taken back by, in a way, and that's really scary. Also, I really like the notion to explore in our topic and how still divisive the word witch is, because today it still defines somebody who is how how did you say that, Marion? Who is not persona
inconvenient,
persona non grata, non gradita, somebody who's not part, of the norm in a way. And I think that's where the link is, where we use that word as a reclaiming word, so that we want to say, it's like that sentence: I am woman, hear me roar. I am witch, watch me burn. In a way, I am here now. You cannot put me to stake, and so I will use that word, the word that was used in the past for people who were not welcome to the community, or were ostracized for a number of reasons, and I'm going to use that to mark myself. So you cannot mark me, because I'm myself using that word too, and I reclaim that as a diversity mark, maybe. How do you feel about that, Carolyn? Do you use the word witch for yourself, for instance?
I do, but it's interesting, because the only reason I use the word witch, but simply because interestingly, my path to paganism began with witchcraft. So that that was how I discovered goddess, many moons ago. Yeah, so for example, I love watching all of the I have a chuckle at is it Hocus Pocus? Those films.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, love Hocus Pocus, but I do not. That doesn't resonate with me as to my idea of witch, for example. And me and how much I love my linguistics as well. So witchcraft and Wicca, for example, two very different streams of paganism. I think there are, I definitely think there's something to be said for people reclaiming that title for themselves. And also, I think I've got deep respect for people that do not like that word, like that title, and also don't wish to reclaim that title for themselves. I think it's really interesting to see the difference, like Annabelle said, that there's been so much almost lost in translation, lost in that journey from those ancient times to now, and all of the masses that films, literature, cartoons, even everything. There's been so much lost, and so much magic lost in a lot of that, and a lot of the woundings that have taken place historically. And there's that deep wounding psychologically for a lot of people to do, linked with the word witch. That's a little bit played down, and a little bit it can be a bit hurtful for some people, I think, to see some of the playful aspects that it's. I'm not speaking as articulately as I want to. I know what I'm trying to say. It takes away a lot of the pain. Does that make sense? It's limiting. It's downplaying the heritage, I think, of witches, of witchcraft, of Wiccans. And I've got a lot of respect for both paths. I do see them as quite different personally. I see the Wiccan path and the path of the traditional witch is quite different. But I've got deep respect for both. And I think there's a deep heritage to both that is lost in a lot of media today. But I also think it's a very alluring image, like you said yourself, Andrea. There's a lot of Instagram-worthy witchcraft images, aren't there? I see it a lot on my Instagram feed, for example. Some beautiful women out in the woods with candles and fires and things. It's a very evocative image that is linked with paganism now.
Yes, I think that, and you were talking about witchcraft and Wicca, but then you have hedge witches, and then you have the craft. I think there's many more divisions, or not. They are kind of all in one family, but they are not all the same. I think people say, "Oh, Wicca," and I'm doing the crafts, which apparently is something really different, and I don't know the ins and outs of all it, but I do see it's like a family. It's kind of a family, and it's it's the pagan family, and then you have like the family group of the Wicca witches, hedge witches, and then you have the family group of the druids, and then you have the family group of the priestesses. For me, there are differences, and you were saying just now, like, not identify, and so I don't identify as a witch, and I think for me, that's not so much about the history, because I have experienced in meditation past life witch killing, not burning in my case, but a different killing. But for me, it's more about the practices. So, for instance, I really don't do any spells. It's really not my. I don't come from the Wicca. I don't into my priestess self. I in the pathways. So I don't come from that. A lot of people come, like you said, Caroline. You come from the Wicca. You come from the witchcraft. But I don't, and I've never really. And I see spells, something, for instance, that is specifically for that, for the Wicca, for the witchcraft and craft. And I don't really do spells. It's really not something I do, and for me that is a big difference, and that kind of doesn't make me identify as a witch. I think that for me is, I don't know if that's true, but for me personally, that is a big identifier. So I think there's enough, and I love that you say that, Annabelle, about, that she, and I've read your book, and it's amazing. Really, I was quite an eye-opening of the true feeling of what these women have gone through, and the depth and the horror of it. So I love reading it, but it was also quite an eye-opener for me. But for me, it's the reclaiming of the word priestess is already, for me, quite important. And it's almost, for me, that's enough work for me. I don't need to reclaim the witch for myself as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Marion. I mean, I think I resonate deeply with your path, and I've never referred to myself as a witch. I've always referred to myself as a priestess. As a Gnostic, that is just my path. But what I find really interesting is when a lot of mainstream people hear about what I do or read about my spiritual path, they'll immediately say, oh, you're a witch. But when they use that term, it's in quite a derogatory way, which I think is very offensive to people who do use that term. But yeah, I completely resonate with you, Marion, and your path.
And it's interesting because in my work, I used to work as a lawyer, and in the solicitor's office I worked. They knew about my path. They knew I was a priestess, but they still called me a witch.
Yeah.
And at one point, and it's also, for me, that also kind of brings it into kind of a dangerous zone, because at one point there was a big case, was won, and they say, oh, you have to thank Marion because she's a witch and she made it happen. And I'm like, oh, no way. It's nothing to do with me. It's the skill of the lawyer who won the case. And also, I really felt that's really in my bones, is that, because next time when you lose, you will say it's Marion's fault because she's a witch. And I'm like, oh, that's danger zone. It's not gone out of society. And I do hear what you're saying. It's a derogative, almost a bit like, it's a derogative and a fear place that people sometimes talk about when they say the word witch. There's something that they don't know exactly what it is, but they're kind of afraid of it. And I think a lot of that, there's a danger feeling around it for me.
I agree. I think it's very much that general. It's people that aren't necessarily in the pagan world. It is a term that will be used potentially by people that have got a lot of fear, also by people that are curious. They've got that bit of, oh, she's, it can be said. I've had it and experienced it being used by people who don't understand necessarily, like we've said, the many lineage of witchcraft and Wicca but it used as a term of something, oh, she's witchy, she's, a bit magical, a bit mysterious about that. So different, I think it's not necessarily, my experience has not all been necessarily negative, that people that don't understand use the term, but it's very much, as I can't remember which round table it was now, but when we've talked before about generalizations of people, that when they're not living it and they're not in it, it's just a term that is used as an umbrella. And when you are living it and in it, some people can take real offense at it and think, well, I'm a Wiccan, I'm not a witch, or I'm a priestess, I'm not a witch, or I'm a witch, not a priestess. So it's really interesting, the relationship that individuals, myself included, have with language, I think, and with titles. And like, was it last week we were talking about archetypes, or there was one, I can't remember which week we were talking about archetypes, but the archetype of the witch, for example, it's a lot of people will identify it as a witch in October because it's Halloween coming up, and it's there's a kind of resurgence of people buying candles in Star Child and things, I would imagine, because it's you know, I've got witchy t-shirts I like to wear in October and things like that. But I would wear them in July as well. But it's do some people wear them in July? I don't know.
Sorry, I was going to say, no, I really agree with you about like the semantics around word, and it can be so different for every individual. But for me, I think the word witch carries with it the energy of persecution. Maybe because I spent so many years researching the witch burnings and writing my novel, but like when I witness or am at the receiving end of modern day witch hunts perpetrated by other sisters, you know, I'm using that as a pejorative, you know, persecutory experience, rather than it being, you know, something positive. And I do think it has that, well, for me anyway, as an individual, it has that element of persecution attached to it. I don't think for me I can separate that because of the witch burnings, and because of the way the word witch and 𝘧𝗪𝗪 were used historically, and the witch hunts, and then seeing how that energetically still plays out in society, and even in you know, the goddess community. And sisterhood. So I think it's really interesting to go on that individual journey into what the witch and the witch hunts you know, really mean for us, and within you know, our societies and collectively as well.
Yeah, so the word witch in a way defines a journey through time and history, where we read every now and then, you know, in very provocative posters or in documentaries, who is the witch? But the point is that it's a multifaceted and multi-shaped archetype that really changed maybe throughout history. So the first time that we hear of the witch, that we see the witch, it's Annabelle, the historical figures who were described. So the outcasts, or the very rich ones who were, you know, taken advantage of to reclaim their lands or riches. And also they were the wise women, the healers at the time. There are many, I mean, from the start there was a multitude of people who were under this derogatory term that were all grouped in the same, let's say, part of humanity. So the witches were a very heterogeneous group of very different people in very different stations in their lives. But then if we look at history and at how that witch moves, that word moves, I think it's very interesting as well, because then we move to, let's say, flash forward to the 60s or the 70s, or let's say the past century in Europe, where the witch has a resurgence as a, like, you know, the masonry, or with the cults, or with the 70s, you know, with the Wicca coming up and as well. So the witch is another thing entirely. And before that, the witches were also, if we think about other figures in history like Marie Laveau or other things, who are not necessarily witches in the European sense of the term, but the witch really shape-shifted through history. And then we have the 90s and the past decade, where the witch became really a pop thing. So you have Hocus Pocus, where good or evil doesn't make any difference, and like the synonym of the witch becomes power. So we like her if she's evil, like Hocus Pocus. They literally suck the life out of children, but we still love the Sanderson sisters for some reason, but they're actually killers. And then you have the Hollywood sisters from Charmed from the 90s that are basically superheroes in doing some Wicca spells here and there, but they're still defined as witch. And it's, to me, incredible how the same word can carry such an historical, heavyweight, and then become like the Marvel superheroes of the last decades. So when we say we reclaim that word, I feel that we can be free to reclaim one of those meaning, maybe. I mean, to me, for instance, and I would love to hear how it is for you. To me, as a queer person, for instance, witch was a very empowering term. It was like, yes, I've been told in my life I'm different, that I'm queer, so yes, I'm a witch, because it brings out the part of, there's an intention to it. When you are defined as a queer person, and you like queer people, LGBTQA plus people are kind of, have been or are still for most part the witches in a way of this time for it, in a certain way. So you're like, instead of you giving me the term, I will dress it, I will wear it with pride and honor, and that means power to me. I don't know if today, nowadays, I will define myself as a witch, but back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, gosh, I'm old. Yes, I would definitely have called myself a witch because it was empowering to me. And then discovering the history Annabelle was talking about, indeed, I questioned if I was actually defined as such. But it is incredible to me the amount of how do you say that? Meanings that the word has and brings along. So, Carolyn, for instance, you do resonate with 19th extravaganza like I do. So, was there ever a time where you felt that one of the witches that was portrayed in media was particularly resonant with you?
I think an interesting one from the media then would be Willow in Buffy.
Oh God, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So she's like the good. She has both sides to her, doesn't she? She has the power of and she's the good witch, and then when she is experiencing grief, she flips to that dark aspect and the dark side.
Shadow.
Yeah.
And
so I think
for the people who are not nerds.
Media,
for the people who are not nerds who are connected right now or following this, Annabelle, do you have an idea of Buffy?
I do, but I didn't watch it. I think my kids did, probably.
Okay. So Willow was a character that is a witch, and she is very shy at the beginning. Then she becomes a full-fledged witch. She has superpowers. Then she becomes very dark. But what's interesting is at the end, when she saves the whole world, she becomes a goddess.
Yes.
When she has white flowy hair, she's like, they look at her and they're like, Willow, you're not a witch anymore. You're a goddess, which is really interesting if we weave that into this conversation today. So Willow.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with her that she has that journey of power. You see the different aspects when she's in her dark, as you said, when she's, even her hair color changes, doesn't it? So when she's in the dark shadow self, she's got the dark hair. At one point she's all veiny as well, isn't she, I think? So it's really interesting how that journey, how the archetype of the witch in just one pop culture character. Exactly. So she's always got too much power, hasn't she? At one point, she's it's really, or she's misusing her power. As Marion said, it's that shadow side of the archetype. So it's really interesting. I like her. Yeah, I think she's particularly interesting.
And I think that also when I'm listening to you, it's like that's when the crone archetype starts being woven with the witch, and they become almost one entity in a sense.
And it's interesting because that is, I haven't talked about that, because the fairy tale witch is of course a whole different thing again, because that is the crone, like you said, Annabelle. The person who initiates. In almost all fairy tales, she is the one who kind of draws out the reaction and initiates into another phase of people, in the main characters in the storytale, in the fairy tales, the main characters are tested and they are brought into the next phase, and they are more the crone witches, which is a completely different thing again, isn't it? It's like the fairy tale witch.
Totally.
Yeah.
So is it a word that resonates with power, with all its facets in a way? So the the wreckage and the destruction and the fury, but also the empowerment, is a very strong word that brings along many, many different facets, all related to power. I would say it's used for empowerment. It's used for to use power, to invoke power bestowed by deities or powers of nature upon you. It is a word of power. What I don't know if somebody of you can help me with the semantics of English, but in Italian, the word strega refers to the strix, so the night bird that brings wisdom along. So that there was also and we are relation to this esoteric world, to this unseen world. So the witch is still a creature of the unseen, even when it's used as the derogatory term, is used as the night, as the unseen, in a world back then where the mystery of the night was sin, was something that was to be ashamed of. So is the witch a means that we use sometimes, and also in the pagan community, to free ourselves from the shame, from the where we cease being the victim and we start being the operators of our future?
I think the reclaiming of the word witch is definitely a thing that helps people to be seen, and to be seen how they really are. I think that is what you're saying, when they come out of the dark, out of the unseen, and in that way, I think it is a term of power. But I think what you're also saying is with the dark and light, that immediately reminded me. So, I mean, you have white witches and dark witches or something. As I said, it's not really my world, but it's I think there's also the power comes with a lot of responsibility, as priestesses, of course, as well, and priests. But in the witches, I think the working with spells and the intention, there's a lot of things around, like you send out 3 times, the rule of 3, that when you sound out 3 times, come back 3 times. But still, there's a lot of, and I've heard that firsthand as well from people who are working as witches, that they also use it as a power to not do good, or to punish, or to do things like that. And I think that part of the witch is, when I think about the power, it's really that is a dangerous place for me as well, with the dark side of witchcraft, and maybe that's another reason why I don't identify with it.
I think for me, it's the dark side of humanity. I think you could call yourself a priestess, still have a darker side to be, and not, So I think I personally don't experience white and black witches. I just think it's white. It's good and bad people, or having a bad day. Even you could be, you could, if that makes sense.
And it's the light and shadow aspects within each of us, isn't it?
Exactly.
Because we've all got that, that part of us that can turn into a Lilith raging banshee. And but it's really interesting, because I was reflecting when you were asking that question, when people say to me, "Oh, you're a witch," but in a really derogatory way, I will fire back, "Yeah, I am." Because I'm reclaiming that as a force of power, just as you've described, Andrea. It's like, I might be a priestess, but if you want to throw witch at me, I'm a witch. Back off. Because for me, it is that really empowered, part of me that has journeyed to very, very deep shadow places in past lives, and in this life, and there's a power in the sense of an inner strength and liberation and independence. It's like a don't mess with me place, that is what I would say is my witch part or warrior part. That kind of crone energy, really, you know.
Is it possible also that it puts us in a very uncomfortable position, the word itself? Because I feel that but like personally, I don't resonate with the concept of light, dark, of good, bad. It's about decisions. It's about, you know, the variability of life. So, but to claim that, like to claim yourself as a witch or any similar term that refer to power, puts you in a very uncomfortable position where, like, it's not that you're a good person or a bad person, but you are saying, I have power to do things. So basically, whatever you do defines who you are. So it calls for responsibility in a very different way than the priestess does. I feel that when we embody the priestess, it brings our responsibilities to do, you know, to carry a light, to bring, to create a space, to hold energy, to hold people, to hold a temple, be it real or, you know, within. While the word witch, I think it have a bit of a different aspect of that. So you come out of this balance between good or bad, and instead of the priestess, the word witch gives you power, sheer power. And it's also a very huge responsibility of what you do with yourself, because it's not the word defining who you are, but it's that the way you use that inner strength and will that you have for yourself that defines who you will be. So maybe some people looking back at their, you know, at their path, they can appreciate that word, or maybe not feel that maybe it was too much for them. I don't know. What I wanted to ask was, have you ever felt like the archetype of the witch was projected onto you, and have you ever experienced something that this word evokes a lot, which is the witch burnings? Have you ever experienced, even if you don't identify as witches, something similar to the witch burnings? So to be the outcast, to be the person who's burned at the stake for something that is not actually what you're doing or what you are, you know, doing with your life.
I mean, I think I personally, I've experienced that repeatedly through my life. And I think the other thing that's really interesting to say about the witch burnings is, although the Inquisition was a creation by patriarchal religion, actually some of the majority of people who accused the women were other women. And we see this still playing out, you know, in the international sisterhood, you know, often by women who claim to be witches or to be, you know, restoring witchcraft. And so I think it's really important. It's very deep in the collective unconscious of the sisterhood. And so personally, I think it is so important that each of us dismantles that within ourselves. You know, I'm sure everyone resonates with that. We each have that part in us that has either been on the receiving end of a witch hunt, an outcast, which can trigger that very deep collective unconscious past memory, that equals danger, that equals possible loss of life, torture, death. But also, I think, you know, if we're really honest with ourselves, each of us has that potential to also engage in a witch hunt against another person, you know, or to be pulled into the stories of the victim and to feed the fire of that witch hunt. And so I think for me, part of the path of the priestess or a healthy sisterhood is about being really looking at that part within, you know, what those two parts within us, with honesty and integrity, and working together to dismantle, you know, that the internalization of that.
It is very interesting also because maybe sometimes groups, I mean, Goddess Conference works in a ceremonial group, which is a group of sisters. But is it true, Annabelle, this is for you as well, so you experienced this in your life, the witch burnings, but is it also true that when we find ourselves in groups, there is an ingrained mechanism by which the witch is generated? So in a group, you have like the majority that tend to form and create the norm or the accepted norm, and then there are the outcasts. Is it something that happens often when you have group at work, at large, I mean in life? Is it something that triggers that process of the witch creation, not just the witch burning, but is it also the group work in the way society works? Thanks to Patrick, thank you very much, that that we are stimulated to create the witch and to identify that and to point our fingers and say, witch.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you see it in every family. You know, I know it's deemed to be a pejorative term now, but this historical concept of the black sheep of the family, that individual is the person who carries the projected shadow of the other people within that group, family, community, who don't have the strength to look at their own shadow. And so they project it onto that person and they carry it for them. And for me, that is, you know, the archetype of the witch, the outcast, carries everyone else's projected shadow for them and is ostracized for that.
And I think and fear, they carry a lot of the fear that, you know, that people have, and they think, you know, the things that we are afraid of, we give that to you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, and I think when you are a very empowered, independent woman, then you attract a huge amount of shadow projection because you're holding up a mirror to all the other people who haven't yet found the courage and strength to set themselves free. And that's what happened in the witch hunts, you know, with a lot of the women, that it was other women who were so threatened by their autonomy or their strength or their skills or their independence, who then turned on them.
And Carolyn and Marion, have you ever experienced something that is like the witch burnings in your life, something that impacted you, where you felt like the outcast that was burned at the stake by a majority that you know, felt like they were friends or your family? You know, when you experienced that, how did it feel? Can you resonate with that experience of the witch burnings?
I can, yeah, I can. But I think it's interesting that I think it was yourself, Andrea, that said it was very much about that responsibility, the archetype of the witch and self-responsibility. So, for example, my experience was such that I actually stepped into the witch archetype as an archetype of power almost, and accepted my own responsibility and walked away from. So rather than I was kind of almost carrying the torch, if you like, and walked off with it, rather than grabbed it off from the hand of the person that was about to do the burning and walked off with it.
Yay!
Lighting my way in the darkness, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that element, in that experience, the archetype of the witch actually gave me some inner strength. So not in terms of when I talk about the archetype of the witch, I'm not talking about doing magical spells or anything like that. For me, it was very much about balance, about resonating with nature, you know, the power of the moon and the sun, and the god and the goddess. So bringing those two, feeling that the support and the guidance of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine, which was very much a part of my craft. So I think for me, yeah, I did experience that, but it almost, if anything, I was in a position where I just felt able to, like I said, take the torch and think, yeah, you can try to burn me, but I'm off.
I'm taking the fire.
Marion, where are you?
I'm going to grab the flame and keep walking, Marion.
Yeah, fire flame keeper. Yes. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've had many places in my life where I was outcast. You know, both in many parts of my life, in the youth and my adulthood. But the funny thing, the one that came up to me was in a witches cafe. So I went to a witches cafe where I lived in the Netherlands, and I didn't fit in, and they were very strict in their their teachings, and it had to be this way and that way, and I wasn't free to choose. And at one point, it was actually about the moon. I mean, I love the moon, but I am definitely a sun person myself. And I had this discussion, and they were really saying, well, you have to, be devoted to the moon and not to the sun. And I was like, why? And at one point, I got so upset that I said, well, you wouldn't even see the moon if it wasn't for the sun. And I walked out, but I really felt outcast. There was no space for my own being, and the way I wanted to be spiritual, the way I wanted to be in connection with Goddess. And yes, for me, there was no freedom. And I was like, that was exactly what I was looking for. I came out of the church with all the dogmas. I was looking for a free way. And in the books and all the things that I read about, witchcraft and druidry and all the things, I was just exploring all that. And the one thing I was like, oh, it's so free, it's connected with nature and all that. And then I came into that and I felt an outcast again, which, was a bit ironic, really.
It is. Also, I think maybe some of us who actually started from Wicca or witchcraft, which is also the only thing maybe spiritual you can find in small towns. I'd say that was my experience. Wicca was the only thing. It was not Catholicism you could find in a really small town. But to me personally, it was really weird to do things in a group. To me, the witch to me was, being in nature with my hands in the soil, in the ground, and like my veins becoming, those roots of giant trees was beautiful imagination. And then to me, to have synthetic clothes in a circle was really weird. What is this all about? And so I really objected for many years of, going into group things. So yes, there is freedom search, I feel, in the word witch. So I think that maybe, Marion, what experience that you read about a witch and that you were hoping to find freedom, but you did not find it. You find another group where you were the outcast, which is... Yeah, is a witch burning in a way. It's
also in the priestess path, I think as a priestess as well, you can be really misunderstood. I've had talks with family members that I was really enthusiastic and talking about being a priestess, and it was like I was talking Chinese to them. There was no way they could relate. And I was like, okay, where they were, it was really like in places like the ceremonial group that you can actually feel like, I can be myself. I can truly be myself in the way I am, whether it's witch or priestess or, it's just, I really appreciate that coming here as well in Avalon, where I wasn't strange anymore. But was actually probably very normal. So
I feel in some way all of us in this panel today are anyway witches, where we, like in our small towns, if we go outside this panel or the Glastonbury or the Avalon, let's say, realm, we can be seen as witches. So let's we're witches here, so watch us burn. But before of that, I would love to see our beloved Katinka talking about a beautiful offerings we have from the Goddess Conference this year.
Welcome to the Goddess Web. We are so excited to tell you about this new amazing streaming platform that we are launching. An amazing place for goddess wisdom and voices internationally. Presentations and offerings that will be by subscription. This amazing new experience is a unique creation that will bring you the Goddess Conference, the Glastonbury Goddess Conference, in your home. It is going to be a development that we are working on every year. And so, for example, this year subscribers will receive an experience of the Goddess of Healing Conference that will give you access all year round to these extraordinary wisdom keepers who will be presenting specially designed context that you can't find anywhere else, not even if you come to us in the in-person conference. So please come and check us out. The Goddess Web is open from today for subscriptions, and we so look forward to sharing this amazing platform, this online experience from the heart of the Glastonbury Goddess Conference with you all.
So thank you, Katinka, for this. And also, I love to remind all of us, all of you listening on Facebook Live right now, or on the podcast, or on YouTube, also some of the details that are happening around this panel for our panelists here. So Caroline has beautiful offerings on a profile. Please check her on Instagram. So Princess of Brigantia, she has a wonderful channel. She's really positive. She's a delight. She will enlighten your days.
Oh.
You really do, Caroline. You do. Every time you pop up in the feed, it's like a ray of sunshine. So thank you for doing that. Please check out 𝗂𝗓𝙂𝗔𝗦𝗍𝗍 at 𝗂𝗓𝙂𝗍𝗍. And also referring to today's topic, she has a book out, which is The Serpent's Tale, that documents that. And it's really enlightening. So please check that out. And also our website, 𝗂𝗓𝙂𝗍𝗍.com. And Marion Brigantia, here at my right, she is going to release a fantastic book. So it's... can you talk about it, Marion?
It's Bridget Unraveled, and it's with the printers now, so hopefully it'll be out soon.
She's making it a lot for this book, but it's coming. I promise you all, it's coming. So you will be able to check it out at Goddess Conference, right, Marion?
Yes,
okay.
It will be there.
So it will be there. So it's going to be an amazing book, and please check her out at Priestess Marion Brigantia on Instagram as well. So thank you all for participating, Caroline.
Bye.
Annabelle.
Bye.
And Marion.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for all of you following. Please check out our YouTube, and see you next week for the next roundtable. Thank you so much. Bye.
This is the Roundtable, a talk show brought to you by the Glastonbury Goddess Conference. In this circle, the priestesses of the ceremonial circle, the weavers of our annual gathering, talk about pivotal topics about our community, spirituality, and goddess.